jump in and start talking about stuff. I have the Dropbox open. Oh, and right. So I'm recording now, so I should say hi everybody who is watching later on YouTube. So most of you know that this is Danielle from Forlorn Hope. But for everybody that didn't know, this is Danielle from Forlorn Hope. Who's talking about our theme today, which is Forlorn Hope. Yeah. I emailed out a handout to people that I basically just like took, the explanation of Forlorn Hope from your website and from T. Edward of the basic backstory of Matthew Rorick and you and stuff like that. So I have that in front of them, but that's basically it. When did Matthew Rorick start? When did Matthew Rorick start Forlorn Hope? And I feel like that's probably a question where it's like it wasn't just like one day Matthew Rorick was like, I am a professional winemaker now. I have a winery. It wasn't like one day I am not a winemaker, and the next day he was like, I have a winery. Like that's process, right? And
yeah. He did a lot of things before he got into winemaking. He was in the Navy. He was like a semi-professional or professional skateboarder for a minute. He's from San Diego, well, Oceanside, just outside of San Diego. So he grew up kind of skating and surfing and chilling. He's very like academia based. So I think he was probably going more in like literary studies. I think he was going for his master's in Chicago for anthropology. But his grandfather had a wine cellar that he was always like bringing out bottles and opening them with Matthew and just like over, cooking dinner, just talking about the wines. And that's kind of what started Matthew on the journey. And then ended up like switching his major and going to UC Davis for, Joe Watts. Hi, buddy. I love that picture. Hi. I love Joe. He's my buddy. So he switched his major over and went to UC Davis for viticulture and enology. And then he did like what we all do, which is just cram a bunch of harvests in as fast as we can. He did down in New Zealand, Chile, maybe Argentina. I can't even remember. South Africa, perhaps. Anyway, he did a bunch of like Southern and Northern hemispheres back to back and ended up making wine at like Mira, Elizabeth Spencer, just like bigger production, kind of like Napa Valley, Cab, Chard, very like out of the playbook of UC Davis as far as how you're making the wines. But knowing his like love for old world wines that he had gotten from his grandfather, he knew that there was a way to make wines without a bunch of chemical adjustments. So he was kind of wanting to figure out how to do that and make that style of wine. And he knew it was a thing. He's like, this is possible. I can do this. So he took what he learned at UC Davis as far as what you need to do in order to make, like consistent, clean wines without having to do a lot of additions or adjust the chemistry. So he took that knowledge and used it towards making low intervention wines. And he was making wine, a full-time winemaker for Elizabeth Spencer, and then started the side project being Forlorn Hope. And so, yeah, it wasn't just a jump in, like I'm doing this. He had like a legit job where he made good money, and he had like the ability to start doing the side project as part of like, they allowed him to do it at the facility where he was making the wines. And he started off wanting to, and we still do this, work with, the grapes that no one cared about back then. Now, like everybody wants what they've not heard of, or like the cool new, like, ooh, Trousseau, Mongoose, like Jura, so hot right now. But back then, if it wasn't Chard and Cab and Pinot, people did not give a shit about wine. Like they're like, is this Cabernet from Napa? Then why do I care? Why are you here? So that's why the name Forlorn Hope came into existence, is it's from this Dutch term, Verlorn Hope, which is like the front lines of a battle. And they're the people that are probably going to get killed, but they're going to try anyway. And so it was like the ultimate like underdog trying to, you know, just be out there in this world that nobody cared about that style of wine at the time. And here we are, like, my God, almost 20 years later, still going, you know, so that's fun. And we still are working with those varieties. Like he started with Verdelho for one instance, for one example, Verdelho being a grape that was wildly planted in California back in the day. And then, you know, Prohibition happened, phylloxera happened, and then just the general only wanting Cab, Chard, and Pinots, people ripped out a lot of these like kind of heritage grapes that were brought over here originally, to replant them for Cab, Chard, and Pinot. So he was finding these little vineyards everywhere that had these, you know, grapes that no one was talking about. And he was like, oh my God, that's amazing. Like, I want that fruit, like Alvarello, whatever that is, I want that. So that was kind of like his mission. And he was driving all over the damn state to get this fruit, to sample it. It's so much work. So he bought the vineyard in 2013. And in 2018, me being the mean girl came in and was like, you need to stop buying fruit from everyone else. Like, you've got to stop the madness. Because it's just, I've never done it. I've never gone out and had to sample fruit from anywhere but our own vineyard. I cannot imagine logistically what it must be like when you have a winery full of ferments, fruit coming in from your picks, people buying fruit from you, and you're going to drive to Santa Barbara to go sample Riesling. Like, that's, that's crazy. So starting in 2018, we were all estate fruit, which is no shortage of options. We have now 40 something different varieties growing on our property. So we've got plenty to work with.
How many, so you bought the vineyard in 2013, and there were already vineyards there. And then did you graft a bunch of stuff over to other varieties and stuff like that, so you could like quickly like transition or like have, you know, more like Barbera and stuff like that there?
Yeah. So when Matthew took over, the property had been basically no one was using it. It was owned by the bank at that point. So, Demetrio, who's been working on that property for almost 20 years, he had been kind of doing what he could to keep some of the vines alive with a very limited budget, whatever the bank gave him to do frost protection or whatever. So anyway, Matthew came on in 2013 with his family, and there was about 20 different varieties growing, pretty much all of which is still there except for the Viognier. That's what he grafted out immediately, the Viognier. He put in Chenin and Trousseau. I think those were the two first things that he did, which happened to be two of our favorite and most popular wines. So that was a good choice. And since then, we just have been kind of evolving the vineyard into stuff that we're more interested in. Not that there weren't a lot of cool options to begin with. Like one of the wines you have now today is the Pinot Grigio. So there was already Pinot Grigio growing on the property, which is cool, you know, like he had Verdelho out there, he had Alvarinho, Peak Pool. So not the typical grapes that you would imagine. There's Chard, Cab, and Merlot as well, and Pinot Noir as well. But yeah, it was cool to see what was there, and then how we've transitioned it both to work with grapes that we want to bottle singularly on their own, and also like as components of the bigger picture being the Queen of the Sierra wines. So both of those things kind of.
So that's really cool. I didn't realize, I mean, this is sort of different direction, but Demetrio was already there working on the vineyard before Matthew bought it. He was, I don't know what the caretaker for the property or something like that.
Yeah, he's the vineyard manager. And he was previously for another owner. And then another person took over and fired or didn't want to pay Demetrio, wanted to bring in someone else. But Demetrio was like already still doing all the work anyway. And so when Matthew came on from those people, from the last situation that was on, he hired back D to take back over the property. And D and his family live on the property. They live just down the road from where the house is and the winery is. And they're like, they're awesome. They're part of the whole thing. So I don't know what we would do without him. And Rosa helps us with bottling, and the kids are always like driving around on 4-wheelers and hanging out and stuff. So it's really cool.
So how did you talk? Can you tell us a little bit about, was it 2016 that you did the first harvest with him?
Yeah. So I had, I always worked in restaurants in Maine. And I was getting more and more interested in wine. I ended up going to South Carolina and selling wine for a distributor who had Matthew in his book. Matthew came down with Dan Petrosky of Massican Wines for a wine and food festival. And we just had a blast. And I kept in touch with him. I really wanted to see what a vineyard looked like, see what a ferment looked like. I'm from Maine. I had no idea. Like out here, it's everywhere is a vineyard, everywhere is a winery, but obviously where we're from, it's not like that. So I just didn't even know what a tank looked like. I had no idea. So Matthew very generously said yes to that. And I worked one last summer at Eventide in 2016, and then bought a one-way ticket to California and showed up with my belongings. And Matthew was like, oh, she's like moving in. And yeah, after harvest, I just said, I'm not leaving and I work for you now. So here we are. But yeah, it was, within 3 hours of being in the cellar, I knew that I was never going to go back to restaurants. Like I knew that this is it's just as like crazy, full on hard work as a restaurant. Probably more so, and even more filthy and but I just love it. And then I get to do all of these other things on the off season, in addition to just the bottling, the topping, the racking, all the routine wine work that we have to do throughout the year. I also, run all of the logistics and sales and wholesale, DTC, the tasting room, like all those things. So it's great. I can travel, and we should be just getting back from Australia right now because we make wine down there as well. But thanks to Miss Rona, that wasn't working for this year. So hopefully next year. Our friend did make wine for us down there, so I'll be anxious to see how that turns out. But yeah, we're very much wanting to get back down there next year.
So I'm kind of curious. I guess I have the Dropbox open here in the background. So if you want me to go to that at any point, I can like hop over there. But when Matthew bought the vineyard and then like you came on, was there much there in the way of winemaking equipment, like tanks and barrels and pumps and stuff like that, or did like he have to acquire more stuff? And then like, what do you use? Like, do you use wood? What kind of wood? How big are the barrels? Like, what do you and he sort of like prefer winemaking wise? Because at this point, like I've been around and I've seen a whole bunch of different wineries, and every time I talk to different winemakers, and I'm like, why are your wines the way that they are? And they're like, oh, I just make wine the way that everybody else is. But as I've gone and looked at wineries in different parts of the world, I'm like, these are all completely different. And people actually do things very differently and use like different materials and stuff like that. And they don't realize that it's different because they're just like, oh, this is how I've always done it. And like my neighbor does it this way. But, like you've got the perspective of making wine other places, like going to Australia and stuff like that. And seeing other wineries in California, which I'm imagining Forlorn Hope is sort of different from a lot of other, like Elizabeth Center, like for example, or somewhere like that. So yeah, can you tell me a little bit about local winery?
Yeah, when Matthew took it over from the bank, he inherited everything that was on the property as part of the arrangement, because it had been foreclosed on previously. It was 100,000 case facility. So there was a bottling line, huge tanks in all different sizes, a press, like everything was already there. Everything was mostly from the 80s. Nothing had been kept up, nothing had been taken care of. So we're working with a very hodgepodge, rustic type of vibe at the ranch. So I go to some places and I'm like, wow, look at the drains in this floor, like just little things that are so exciting to me, because what we're working with is drains you can't drive over the forklift with, or they'll collapse. Or we're making wine in a building that was built in the 1800s that has, beams like this. So you can't just drive the forklift in and dump fruit. You have to be like, I hate that building with like a passion, and I fantasize about tearing it down on a daily basis, but it is what it is. So we could have a lot easier life if we had money, but I guess that's true for everything. But what we have, we make do with, and we make it work. We have since bought a new press. We got a new press. Well, I think it was just gently used, but new for us. And we got that last harvest, which was awesome because the Bucher, which we had bought used previously, failed during harvest. And that was super fun. So we've added some equipment in, and we actually need to buy. He had sold a couple of the really big tanks because he was like, oh, I'm never going to make this much wine. And now we are making quite a bit of wine with the Queen of the Sierra wines becoming so popular. And we have 75 acres of fruit planted. So we have a lot to work with, and we have the ability to make a lot of wine. So we're going to have to buy tanks soon to continue growing as we are. The bottling line is a whole thing. I'm getting texts from Matthew right now as we speak. The bottling line that was there was the bane of my existence, I would say. Like, the filler was created by some human that decided that they knew how to make things, and literally I would have to stand there and pull every 7th bottle or whatever, because that particular filling spout would just spray wine everywhere if a bottle got onto it. So just like things like that we've had to deal with, that most people would never even, they're like, oh yeah, bottling sucks, it's so boring. I'm like, I would love to be bored during bottling. That sounds amazing. But that is not how it is for us. So yeah, that's Matthew being Matthew. And our friend Emma Morris came up to take these photos, which is why they're so nice. Typically, I'm the one taking all the photos with my iPhone. So we've since gotten a new filler, which is now broken, and I'm getting updates right now that the parts are on their way, so we can finish bottling the Queen Amber, which hopefully you guys will be able to get some of. It's probably our most popular wine. It's skin fermented Albarino, Peak Pool, Verdelho, and some Chardonnay. So orange wine, that's what the kids want these days. Yeah, that's little Ellie doing a punch down. That's the building I was talking about. That's like 1 million years old. That the fruit in that actual fermenter, I had to hand shovel into that fermenter because I can't drive the forklift in to dump to that one. So just things like that, like, it's not a thing anywhere else, but it is for us. So, yeah, that's me and some, I think, Barbera. But yeah, that building is just, I included that weird little picture to show you something that we've been playing with, which is a different style of, if you go back one, it's a different style of what that first photo of her with the punch down tool. So that would be typical of what we would do to do cap management, is to punch down the ferment twice a day, in the morning and in the night. to just keep the, the fruit going immersed in the liquid as it's going from fruit to wine to dry, sugarless liquid. It just helps keep the ferment happy and safe from getting some microbial problems, which can happen if you had just like let it sit there and not touched it. You can get issues with that. But the other weird photo of like the tubes and the things, that's this new technique that we're starting doing called the watering can method, which is a pain in the ass, but Matthew loves it. So basically what I'm doing here is siphoning the liquid off the bottom of this, putting it into these little 5-gallon buckets, and then dumping it over the ferment. So it's like a very, very gentle pump over, basically, without using a pump. So you're just kind of like not introducing a whole bunch of oxygen into it, but you're still getting good extraction and still keeping the ferment kind of happy and safe. So that's what's happening there. And I think that's Mataro. Mataro poppy. So yeah, so we are always experimenting with our fermentation techniques. The Queen of the Sierra wines allow us to do that because we blend things together to make those wines. So we can say, okay, we want to take this Mataro and half of it, we have 4 tons. We're going to take 1 ton and destem it. We're going to do 1 ton this watering can method. We're going to do 1 ton 2 punch downs a day. And then we can taste all of them and see what the differences are and see what we like. And then in the end, we bottle what we want of that and then blend the rest into the Queen wine, for instance. So that's something that we really love to do, is to keep learning and growing in that way. And Matthew's been doing this for a really, really long time, but he still is learning and interested in learning. He's not sitting here saying, oh, I already know everything about winemaking, because that's impossible. And if anyone tells you that, they're a liar.
When that's when it's time for them to think about another career, probably. When they think they know. That's probably that's probably when it's time for them to think about another career.
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree. So, I mean, that year, well, in 2018, we made 7 different Zinfandels in 7 different ways just to do it, So it's always fun to keep learning. So yeah, so the Queen of the Sierra wines are blends of our estate fruit, everything we grow on this property here. This is the upper vineyard. There's a lower vineyard that isn't as steep like this, but these are very, very steep. I don't know if you can tell from the photos because it looks like just a wall, and that's really like what it is. So it's really hard to farm. It's very, challenging for tractor drivers. Not many people do it. The weeding, and now that we're farming organically, it adds a whole nother level of how logistically to make that happen. And the reason, that we're able to make this wine without chemically altering to alter the chemistry by adding acid or water, et cetera, is us being out in those vineyards every day during harvest, picking samples of the fruit so that we can check the sugar and pH levels to know when to pick it. And that's a lot of work, and it's very, very hot. And I've definitely almost passed out a few times, but it's fun. I do love doing it. And, you get on the 4-wheeler or the mule and roll around, and it's fun to get out of the winery and go do that once in a while, but it's a lot of work for sure. So that's, I believe, the top of the Barbera block, overlooking the Vermentino is that kind of first wall that you're seeing that we planted in. We grafted in, I think 17 was our first vintage of Vermentino. And that's one of my favorites now. I love it so much. Big Verm. So Queen of the Sierra, the name is actually the town motto of the town of Murphy's, which is where we're located. So Matthew trademarked that, which I think is hilarious. I don't think they know that we did that. And we wanted just like a very female centric name, and like, we just like, yes, Queen, whatever. So we're like, oh, this is perfect. And then I got my friends, Sophie and Michaela, who used to live in Portland. Now they live in Texas, to do the label, of this kind of like crying woman. And then the background is a topographical map of the vineyard, specifically the Shannon block. So it's pretty cool. And I wanted the color to kind of like go with the vibe of the wine. So each one has a different color and stuff. So you guys have the red, white, and rosé, right? Okay. So the rosé, the 2020 you have, I assume, or 2019. I don't know. But they are
2017 white, 2020 rosé, 2018 red, and 2019 Dragon Armada.
Cool. So the 2020 Queen of the Sierra rosé is majority being Tempranillo, Barbera, and Zinfandel. The Tempranillo is always the first thing we pick, and that's always fun. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Evan Lewandowski wine, or Ruth Lewandowski, Evan Lewandowski wines. He has a rosé, I have it somewhere here, that he has, like, I think portion of the fruit is from somewhere else, but the Tempranillo is from us. And so we always kick off harvest with Evan. Doing that first Tempranillo pick together is always fun. Fun way to start harvest. I love him. He's a dear friend. So, and I think we're both going to be in Portland in the beginning of July, which is going to be fun. So I'm sure some of you will see us out and about on the town. So Barbera, Zin, and Tempranillo are the majority of the components of the Queen of the Sierra Rosé. And I would say it is true for the red as well. The red probably has a little bit of, it's got pretty much everything in there, but it's got some Grenache and in there as well. So, and Mongoose, I think, in that vintage. Or no, if you have, the 18 has some Mongoose in it as well. So it's less about what's in the wines and for the Queen wines, and more about like the site itself. So the limestone soil, all those big slopes that you're seeing, there's big outcrops of limestone all throughout the property. And it's a dolomite rich limestone that's pretty rare for California. Yeah, you can see those, like all those big kind of pointy, those are all limestone outcrops. That's really cool. And we've gotten right, hiked all of them before. So it's, other than the poison oak, it's very fun. So it's more about the site itself coming through with those Queen wines, because the limestone just makes everything very mineral based. It has like the saline, salty quality to it. The fruit has really low pH, which means high natural acidity. It means that it's going to age really well. It means we don't have to add a lot of sulfur. So it's all, it's all of those things, especially the Barbera. That one is like crazy low pH. So anyway, the Queen wines are really about that, about this beautiful place and the soil. It's alpine style kind of climate to it. It's we're at about 2,000 foot elevation. If you keep driving up 4 East, like 45 minutes, it shoots up really, really high, and the elevations just starts to climb so that you can be like a beautiful summery sunshine day, and then you drive 40 minutes up the road and it's snowing. It's so weird to me, being from the East Coast, because we just don't have that. So it's what's that?
My experience of Calaveras County, like most of the Calaveras County wines that I've had have been like big, like intense Zinfandels and stuff like that. Like I have this idea of Calaveras County as being like a relatively like warm place, but maybe that's just like the wines that I've had, or like the wines that are out there from Calaveras County are like lower elevation things. Is that unusual that like you're in a higher elevation part of Calaveras County? Is there a lot of other winemaking around where you are?
Oh, that's a common misconception, that people assume that we're really hot. And it doesn't get any hotter there than it does in Napa. And we actually get, I would say, colder at night and cooler in general. A lot of times I'll start in Napa and then drive up to the ranch, or vice versa. And I'll be like, oh, it was a lot cooler up at the ranch than it was here, even though we're, have the bay influence here in Napa, and there's 4 hours away from the coast up in Calaveras. But they just don't have the elevation here. Most of the vineyards in Napa are on flat ground. There's a few that have like on Mount Veeder or Spring Mountain, but those are pretty rare. And the elevation isn't as high as what we have. So yeah, I think there's a lot of really shitty wine made in Calaveras County. Ironstone, I think it's Irons. I always get Ironstone and Iron Horse confused. I think Ironstone's one of the biggest, it's like huge brand, and they buy fruit from all over the place, mostly in the Central Valley or in Lodi and stuff. So the amount of wine being made that's actually grown and farmed around us in Calaveras, I don't think there's many. There's not a lot of vineyards that I even know of just driving around in our area. And I think ours was probably the first of any of them. It was started in the 1970s, and we still have some own rooted One-Take Clone Chardonnay that goes into the Queen White and Amber, that is still kicking, still doesn't get phylloxera. It's from the 70s, own rooted. It's really cool. So yeah, I think that we have, hello, hi, thank you. So yeah, I think that's a common misconception that like, oh, it's so hot out there, but it doesn't. Yeah, it gets hot in the summertime. It can get up to 105, sometimes 107 degrees during the day. But then it gets cold at night. It gets down 50s and 60s. So there's that diurnal temperature shift that makes it perfect for growing grapes. It's also dry as hell out here. So we don't have to worry about a lot of rot problems. Mildew issues are not really a thing that we have to worry about, which is really nice. So it's kind of honestly, the perfect place to grow grapes. So yeah, I think that's also a stylistic choice of the wines that you might be trying. There's not a lot of like nature wine being made out in Calaveras County. So, and now you're seeing like other winemakers that like make wines that we like to drink, buying fruit from us. And then there's like Shake Ridge up in Amador County that Ann Kramer farms. That's another great vineyard that's kind of the same, elevation and style and, stuff like that. So Hank Beckmeyer of La Clarine Farms buys fruit from us. Evan Lewandowski, Jamie Motley, Michael Cruz, Scott Schultz of Jolie Lade, Craig Harmeyer that makes Harmeyer cellar wines. So we have a lot of like more of our low intervention, natural wine, whatever style wines that are coming from fruit from our vineyard. So you're starting to see that more. But before, Calaveras County, I don't think was really thought of as like a very like highly regarded wine region. So
I guess thinking about it now, it makes sense. Like looking at those pictures of your vineyard, if that's what the land is like where you are around there, like, if like someone like Ironstone that just wants to make like cheap conventional supermarket wine, like they're not going to wine there. They're not going to work on slopes like that because it's too much work. It's not worth it. Like they're flat and easy and simple. So, right.
Flat, and they use machine harvesters. Demetrio actually does contract work for them and shows me the videos of the machine harvesters that go through, and they'll pick like thousands of tons in a day. It's crazy. Like they are making massive amounts of wine. You can't even compare the two. That's like an engineered grape product versus wine. Really.
Literally is yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, you mentioned the 2017 Vermentino was one of your favorite wines. Is there any Vermentino in the 2017 Queen of the Sierra White? Or
there's Vermentino in. Yeah, I would say a little bit got in there. There's definitely some that we've put into the amber that's since gone and sold out, but the first vintage of Vermentino was 2017, and we didn't know what to do with it yet. So we took half and fermented it on its skins. We took half and direct pressed it and saw what we liked of those two, and ended up actually liking them blended together. So that's what we did in 2018 as well. So it's kind of like partially skin fermented, partially direct press put together. And then we also do some longer skin ferments that we will do like 8 months on the skins with Vermentino, a Peak Pool, Albarino. And then we, bottle that on its own as its own, but some of it gets blended in. So yeah, it's kind of like a mesh of different things. There might be some Vermentino in there. I honestly have no idea. I would say the majority of 2017 is Chardonnay, Albarino, Peak Pool, some Verdelho.
What was the first vintage of Queen of the Sierra?
I think 2016, maybe 16. It started off as wanting to do some kind of like a, like a village wine from France or something, like a Vin de France, which is like not as highly regarded as their cru wines, but still delicious, affordable, whatever. We wanted to do that and call it kind of a cow village. And that was the original idea. So we took a bunch of wines that we had already had in barrel and ended up blending them together to make the first Queen of the Sierra wines. And I believe that was 2016 or 15. I can't remember. And then it like morphed into the name of the Queen of the Sierra and that label and everything. But before we had done that under another label called Dexter Lake. So Queen of the Sierra is relatively new, but it's gotten really popular. The rosé has been crushing it for the last few years. And now that we're doing the amber, that's wildly popular. And the red was recently written up in the New York Times by Eric Asimov. So that, was already doing well. And then we got a bump in that. And so, so they've been doing really well. And we want to keep growing that because we just wanted to make a wine that we make we make the wines the same way. It's not like we make the Queen wines any different than we make the Forlorn Hope wines. They're all, only minimal sulfur added as needed. Nothing else, no yeast, no fining, no filtering, etc. So we just wanted to make something that's accessible in price and also just in the style. Like I feel like a mom that only wants to drink Chardonnay would like the Queen White, but also someone that's really interested in like weird wild wines will like those wines too, So I think it's a good accessibility point for everyone. I hope that was our intention. So the 18 Queen blend, Chardonnay, Vermentino, mom wine. I would say Chardonnay, Albarino, Verdelho, not Verdelho, different grape. We don't have any Verdelho, and Peak Pool. I honestly don't know how much Vermentino is in there, so I can't say for sure, but there's a little bit of everything in these wines. When I say that, I mean it, but we just got to pick a few and go with that. And so we don't confuse people too much, but I call them choose your own adventure. If you want it to be a Chardonnay blend, it's a Chardonnay blend. People have a little bit harder time conceptualizing what a white blend is versus a red blend for some reason. So I think if you need to be like, oh, this is a Chardonnay heavy blend, then go for it. You're not lying. It's got Chardonnay in it, I promise. But now that it's been out in the market and people have got a chance to try it, the Queen White has started to move a lot more. Before it was like a kind of a hard sell and it was really frustrating for us because we were like, we love this wine. Why doesn't anyone want it? And all the distributors would tell me like, oh, it's because it's a blend and people only want red blends, not white blends. I'm like, what is the difference? But, people can be weird about wine.
They're really weird about wine, but they're catching up. They're getting
Yeah, I think people are getting way more adventurous, just like they are with food, which is really fun. And that's why wines like these that, I call it nature wine to kind of make a joke of the thing, but like, but they're clean. They're not going to be mousy. They're not going to be riddled with VA. You're not going to get like crazy variants in the bottles. Like they're very consistent, I think, as far as the drinkability of them, but they're easy to drink and they're fun. So that's been the best thing about them, I think, is that they're just fun and easy to drink and easy to sell. And we love that.
definitely, it's like, it tastes like that, like rich, accessible, like Chardonnay, like sort of extroverted, like Chardonnay fruit. But then there's like this salty, minerally sort of Albarino thing. Maybe it's Albarino, maybe it's just me choosing my own adventure, but there's this like salty, minerally component to it, like in the finish.
That's the site. That's what I'm saying about like, it's really not about what's in it. It's about the site. And that's what the Queen of the Sierra is about. It's the limestone. Like all of the white wines that we make from the property have that rich textural quality, that like mineral limestone saltiness in the base of it. And I think that that's what comes through. And you had asked me earlier, and I didn't actually get to that, about our wood program. Everything is like hella neutral. We don't use any new oak, not even close to new, because we don't want to add any kind of flavoring. You know, we want it to be as true to the variety and to the site as possible. We also use stainless steel tanks, especially for these larger ferments. Like for the Queen wines, a lot of them are mostly seeing stainless steel. Some of them, we like the red, we do try to put down to barrel. The white, we do try to put down to barrel at some point, but the rosé and the amber are pretty much all in stainless. And I don't think that there is much of a difference to even like mention wood versus stainless with these wines. So yeah, it's basically a big old game of Tetris. What can we fit where? I guess we only have so much space and so much wine to put in the space. So yeah, winemaking is mostly just that and cleaning. That's basically it.
That's what I see when I go to like wineries. Like it's just all cleaning all the time.
All cleaning.
Yeah, and I mean, I was wondering, and then we looked through the pictures of the winery, and I was like, oh, okay, you've got like big stainless steel fermenters, and you've got like open like plastic like fermenters and stuff like yeah. So pretty straightforward.
We've got different sizes because we do so many different sized lot ferments. We do a lot of 1 ton ferments, and then we do those big round, we call them the mushrooms. Those are 3 tons. So, and then we have like bigger tanks that we do some ferments in. So it's all depending on like what we're making. So
2020 Queen of the Sierra Rosé. What's the blend on this year?
Yeah, so that's mostly Tempranillo, Barbera, and Zinfandel. And I've gotten such good feedback about that wine. It's new into the market, and it's always kind of, I don't know, it's like your first baby that you're releasing out into the wild. And I'm like, oh, I hope people like it. So very happy to hear the response to that one. And I think the rosé market, as you all know, can be really fickle. I think however many years ago, the market was just so flooded by like very uninteresting Provence, whatever style rosés, are like very thin and acidic and like not a lot to it. And I think that was cool for a while, and then people kind of got over it. But this wine is like the opposite of that. It's got rich texture. It's got a lot of color to it. It's got a heap of aromatics and just flavor. And it's very salty, like salty kind of watermelon juice vibe to it. And I think that that's what people like about it, that it's just so different than most rosés. And even though it is like, oh yeah, like drink it now kind of thing, we've definitely had people still selling the 2019 vintage, for instance, and saying that it's tasting great. So that's nice as well to see that they're, we try to make our wines be able to age in general. That's kind of our goal. So I'm happy to see that happening with the rosé as well. And we do smaller lot barrel aged rosés in a different style, but I think that this, for like a fun and fresh fruity, that the Queen is really good for that. So
I can totally see this aging well, because it has good acidity, but it also has like good balance and minerality, but then it also has like balance, like the fruit, it's not heavy. It's not like some, like Italian rosés and stuff like that, or rosados that are really, really like the fruit, this has a fair amount of fruit, but the flavor of the fruit is like pretty and it's fresh. It's like fresh. There's a lot of fresh strawberry that I taste pretty, and then some of that like meaty watermelon. But I can totally imagine like what just with like its balance and like the depth that it's got and the presence. Like I can totally imagine it aging really, really well. But it's really like the aroma is right now is gorgeous. It's like really pretty, like watermelon and a little bit of like strawberry and a little like it's a little tiny bit like aromatic herbaceous like too.
Yeah, I'm always loving how the non-fruit characteristics come out on our wines, and I think that's something we really love, is because like anyone can make fruity wine from California. It's hot and sunny here. So it's really awesome to have like the saltiness come out, or like in some of our other wines having just more earthy qualities, like you said, the herbaceous quality of that. I love that's the kind of wine that I'm really excited about. So I'm always happy to have that coming out in our wines. Even something that's more of like a fresh and fruity one, like the Queen Rosé, can have that kind of salty base to it. And I think that that's what makes it more compelling than just being fruity.
It's also got a really like in the best sense, like really delicious, like reduced like cooked tomato sort of thing. On a like tomatoes like cooked down, like making soft. It's got this like really ripe, like rich sort of tomato flavor. Great.
Yeah, I get a lot of tomato leaf in that Dragone Ramato Pinot Gris that you have as well. That's always a tasting note that I get from that one. It's like a tomatoey vibe to it.
All right, Queen Lucia Red now. 2018 red.
So 18, I would say also Tempranillo, Zinfandel, and Barbera, Grenache, some Mongoose. But like I said, I could go on and on. There's Cab, there's Merlot. It really is about the site more than the varieties. I think that that's what's coming through, is that saltiness, that minerality, and then the reds in general have great grip. There's a lot of good fine tannin structure to our reds. We ferment pretty much everything with stems. We like to get the fruit in, foot tread it vigorously, so we are avoiding any kind of carbonic characteristics that could come out if we had left the clusters whole. We foot tread it and then put it into whatever fermenter it's going to be fermenting in. And it takes about 2 weeks to go dry on average. And we do 2 cap managements, either punch down, pump over, or that watering can method I was talking about. We do 2 of those a day, and then press it when it's dry. So super simple. I think that the stems add a bit of, a bit more of that texture and a little bit grip into it. And yeah, I think it's just like it's a weird wine in the sense that it has depth to it, but it also is really like just fresh and drinkable. Some people really like to serve it chilled. Yeah, it's had great response to it. So I'm very happy with how that one turned out, and that people love it so much, because we made a lot of it. So yeah, 2018 was a big fruit year. 2018 and 19, we had a huge crop. We literally ran out of places to put things. I was like, it looks like a trash can, but I think it's an open top fermenter, so let's do it. We really ran out of space that year. So we made quite a bit of that red, and it's selling really well, and people are loving it. So I'm very happy.
Like the aroma is like a little brambly, like I pick up on like the presence of the stems, but I imagine that the inclusion of the stems and stuff in that process, like it may have been a little bit tightly wound when it was younger, but like it's drinking great now, and it tastes like honestly, if anything, it's gonna like continue getting better, like get a little bit more interesting and stuff like that over the next like year or two. This tastes like a wine that is gonna like that has more staying power right now, but that like having the inclusion of the stems and that like that different dimension and a little bit more tannin is really great for the longer term lifespan of it. So that was interesting. I just wanted to, so do you like completely avoid carbonic maceration like with all the reds that you do, or does anything like get carbonic?
Yeah, if we're intending to make a carbonic wine, we do. But if we're not, then we don't want to get that quality. So we vigorously foot tread before we put it into the fermenter. But we've made carbonic, like truly carbonic Zinfandel for the last few years, which we enjoy doing. We have those tanks that you saw the picture of Matthew kind of drinking out of the bottom of it. Those have lids to them. And so we're able to actually like truly inhibit any oxygen coming through. We put dry ice in it, and we put little dry ice every day. We drain the free run juice off the bottom continuously to get like an actual true carbonic fermentation. And then we use that runoff juice. We make a white zin out of that, which has been really fun. And then we have the carbonic Zinfandel that we've made for the last few years. Some things we do kind of semi-carbonically, which is to say that it's not, the oxygen hasn't been removed, as you would need for like truly carbonic fermentation for maceration to occur inside the fruit berry rather than outside. So I think a lot of people kind of use that word like, oh, we carbonically ferment this or macerate this, but you really have to like put it in that anaerobic environment and be taking the free run away in order to make that happen. So not everyone is really making, I think, a truly carbonic wine, which is fine. I'm not like trying to call anyone out, but like some of our wines we make with the intention to be kind of like semi-carbonic and then truly carbonic or not at all carbonic. So those are the options, I guess.
So this is going down the rabbit hole a little bit, or just I'm curious. So what happens if you leave the free run juice in there, like so that it starts fermenting in the juice too?
Yeah. So that kind of negates the intention of a maceration being happening inside the grape itself in this like aerobic environment. If it's happening on the outside, then that's just a regular fermentation, right? Like anything else, it's the juices fermenting into wine. So it kind of will then start to break down the rest of the fruit in the ferment. And then that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that style of doing it. But I'm saying like that one ferment that we do, the Zinni Man, we call it, we do try to make that like truly carbonic and keep the free run juice out of the equation so that when I go to dig out that ferment, it's literally like, it looks like fresh, brand new fruit, pretty much like it's whole berries. So there's quite a bit of sugar still in there. It's like a ton of sugar still in the fruit. So when you press it, and that's why a lot of the wines from like Beaujolais Nouveaux can have a lot of Brett because they had so much sugar in it when you pressed it and put it down to barrel, but that's a whole nother story. And we don't have any Brett so far. Not that I don't like some Brett for sure, but like once you get it, it can be like, you can't necessarily get rid of it. So it's like a very fine line. And I would rather just not have it. I don't want to even deal with it. So I'll drink my bready wines from elsewhere. But yeah.
So what do you do then when you press that and you still have a whole lot of sugar in the juice with the press man? Like what happens?
Yeah, I mean, then it has to keep fermenting in tank or in barrel, depending on what you want to put it in. But yeah, we press it and then it just keeps going through fermentation, through primary fermentation. And you can add sulfur, depending on what the chemistry, we're very cognizant of what the chemistry is telling us in each of the wines to make our sulfuring decisions. But for the most part, like we don't add sulfur at fruit inception. other than the Pinot Gris and the Trousseau. Those are two that we found that do have microbial problems. There's the time between when it's just fruit and when it starts to ferment is the danger zone, because it's just sitting there. And that's when you can get microbial problems. So that's why, typically a lot of people will add sulfur to that at that time, because it doesn't inhibit the initial ferment, but it also like kind of prevents problems. But what we've realized that we can do is kind of like a starter yeast, like you would for a starter sourdough or something. If we have a ferment already going and it's at a good sugar level, we'll take like a jug of that juice from it and pour it into the new fruit. And that kind of like kicks it off in this, like, it's like its own little native starter ferment. So that's been cool. We've been doing that for the last few years, and that's worked really well for us. So that's a fun little thing that we've learned since 2018. We've been doing that.
And then Dragon Romano.
Yeah, so that label, I don't know if you guys have had many wines with the new label. That's a tattoo artist that I found in Australia that I had started getting work done from her. And then Matthew was flipping through her book, because of course he had to get a tattoo too. He couldn't let me just get one on my own. He had to go get one. And so he found this drawing that she had already done. And he was like, why do you have, she's from Australia and she has this, it's a brown bear skull with California poppies in its mouth. And it was just like the perfect thing for what we were looking for our label. So we bought that image from her and he got that tattooed on his arm. And the Dragone Ramato is it's one of my favorite wines. That is, the Pinot Gris was already grown on the property in the lower part of the vineyard. Like I said, it does have a lot of frost issues down there. So it's a very high skin to juice ratio, which I think is where a lot of that color and texture is coming from. The clusters are literally like this big. It's tiny, tiny clusters of fruit. It's a real pain in the ass to pick. We usually have to come in the morning and help the crew finish because they've been working all night trying to get it. And it's just like an Easter egg hunt. It's very hard to find those little buggers in there, but it's very beautiful fruit. It's like this purplish copper hued pink color. A lot of people kind of have their minds blown by Pinot Grigio being not a white grape, but that's usually, you see it presented as a white wine because if you just press it right off the skins and ferment it separately from the skins, you won't get any of that color. But if you do ferment it on the skins, which is hence the name Ramato means copper in Italian. And that's what we're doing in northeastern Italy, where it was kind of originated, that style. You get that gorgeous copper toned color. So it's not technically an orange wine because an orange wine is a white grape fermented on its skins, whereas this isn't actually a white grape, but close. It's a Ramato is the style. And Dragone is the name of the family that owned that portion of the land before Bard and Steveno bought it. So called the Dragone, like ranch was what it was called. So Dragone Ramato is the name of that. So we pick that and it's, we foot tread it with the stem inclusion and ferment it. Just like I said, 2 weeks. It usually takes 10 to 14 days until it goes dry, and then we press it. And that's it. Super easy. That goes down to barrel. We have 227 liter barriques, like regular barrels. And then we have a couple 500 liter puncheons, some 400 liter puncheons. So we tend to, I think we put that one in puncheons. I'm not sure. Can't remember off the top of my head, but that one definitely does go down to oak neutral oak at some point in its life. After it goes through mallow and everything. And all our wines go through full malolactic fermentation, even the whites, everything.
Yeah, I meant to thank you because I meant to ask about that earlier, but then tasting all of these, I was like, it all seem like they just naturally go through malolactic.
Yeah, we don't block it, except for the Semillon that we make. I don't know if you guys ever had that wine, but the Semillon's the only wine that we make that is blocked by filtering for blocking mallow, and that's made off site. It's made at a place down here in Napa. We don't make that wine anymore. Since 2018, we're only doing estate fruit, but that was just to like retain all of this acidity so that it will age for literally like 30, 40 years. But with the property, our property being such low pH and high acidity, it doesn't hurt it to go through mallow and kind of soften the acid a little bit. I like that the mouthfeel is kind of a rounder, having gone through mallow, and then you don't have to worry about, filtering it and all that stuff. So that's always good. And I think people have when I was first studying wine in the Court of Master Sommeliers, I had this conception of malolactic fermentation equaling buttery. And that's not actually true. As you can see, none of those wines are buttery, but they've all gone through mallow. So if you let it go through full mallow, it doesn't have that kind of lactic quality. If you had stopped it during, then it can have some of that lactic buttery diacetyl, I think it's called, right? Diacetyl quality. So yeah.
Boy, I really want to ask you why it doesn't have that diacetyl quality, but I'm not sure if I want to get all chemistry of it right now.
Yeah, I don't think I even remember all of the science behind it at this point. I've deleted a lot of that information from my brain to make room for other things.
Different books about winemaking that get really into the chemistry and stuff and the microbiology of it, and I just reread them because I never retain all of it.
Right.
Refreshing, and I'm like, oh wow, and then I read it a year later. I'm like, oh wow, geez.
Yeah, I've never gone to school for any of this, so I know very little about the actual chemistry of things. I just know how to make wine, and I feel at peace with that. I'm okay with not knowing everything. It's totally fine with me.
Where do you have to get to if you're going to make wine like this? I mean, if you try to know how everything works, then you're going to try and control everything, and you're going to end up with a whole bunch of chemical corrections and additives because you're like, so my wine isn't following my recipe. I've got to intervene and change this and make this wine follow the recipe. Come on, wine, what, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. And a lot of people have a hard time getting away from the recipe following, even if they do want to make lower intervention wines. I think that they get scared and that's fine, or they'll just put a shit ton of sulfur in because they're just worried or, and that, whatever. No shade here. I don't care what you do. Just transparency is nice. That's all.
And I get it because if they're, you have one vintage per year. So if you mess that, I understand the fear of messing that wine up and being well, try again next year.
Yeah.
That's rough. But I guess it helps if you hedge your bets and you have more different cuvées than you can count and they get lost in your winery and stuff like that.
Yep.
The Dragon Ramato is beautiful. This is my first time tasting this vintage. I've had previous vintages of it and I've always really, really liked it. This is great. This is maybe a little bit richer than some previous vintages, maybe a little bit more savory. It feels like it might have a little bit more color than some of the previous vintages. This is just based on my memory, and my memory of all the different wines that I drink and stuff over the years is not perfect, but it seems
it typically has quite a bit of color, more than I think a lot of other Ramatos that people are familiar with. So they're always oh, this one's so much darker. And I don't know why. I think maybe just that skin to juice ratio being really high might be part of it. But yeah, I found that vintage to be have a little smoky element to it, which I really liked too. I can't even say that word anymore because everyone's so freaked out about smoke taint from last vintage. Not that kind of smoke, just a smoked meat or something smoke, which I really like, that quality in it, which I hadn't tasted before. So yeah, but that's definitely one of my favorites. I love that wine and it's one of our more populars. We've been sold out of that for a while. So it's cool that you guys still have some.
I mean, D. Edwards still has it. They keep getting more of it. So.
Yeah. Yeah. They bought a lot, so they have a stash of it, but we ourselves haven't had that wine for a long time.
Yeah, it has. It has more of that, like sort of like the rosé, but it has more of like a like reduced tomato sort of thing, and like an aromatic, sort of like a little bit like basil-y. So there's a whole lot of fruit. There's a whole lot of like stewed peach and stuff like that, I feel like, from it. And it really, like, there's a little bit of that smokiness, and there's also, like, somehow it reminds me of like the really like perfumey, like sort of like sexy aroma of like Burgundian Pinot Noir sometimes. There's like this really pretty aromatic like Pinot thing that it's got that I don't usually get from like other skin contact Pinot Grigio, Pinot Gris.
Yeah.
It's more like fresh fruit and it's more floral, where a lot of like the other skin contact Pinot Gris or Grigios that I run into, like a lot of them are, you know, like Friuli, Slovenia, like stuff like that. And a lot of them are like more earthy, savory, like a little bit more tannin and stuff, and they don't have like the perfume and the floral components that this has, which are really cool. Wow. Yeah. I'm trying to think if I've got any other like real burning questions, or there's anything from like all of that. That was a ton of information.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I overloaded.
Oh, that was great. That was really, really fantastic. That was amazing. I'm just trying to think if there was anything else out of that I wanted to ask about as we were talking.
Well, and if anyone has any follow-up questions, you can always email Ned or email me. I'm Danielle@MatthewRorick.com, and I will answer your questions.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for explaining all of that. That was really, really great.
My pleasure.
I'll email you to follow up, because like T. Edward has a whole bunch of other stuff in that I was not 100% sure what all of it is. Like, you know, Forlorn Hope, I totally get it, and I appreciate like how many different wines that like you make. And I mean, it used to be more like all these different wines every year, and then funny how it happened sometime around the time that like you really got involved, there started being like some of the same wines like year to year, and it was like there was a little bit like more like continuity and stuff like that, but then still like other stuff popping up and things. But I would love input on what other stuff I should grab from T. Edward right now, like while they have it.
Yeah, we should definitely talk. I think the Semillon would be a great choice, just off the top of my head, for so many places that have seafood heavy menus and oyster. That's like the actual perfect wine for that. The name of the wine is Nacre, which in French means mother of pearl. It was meant to be an oyster wine in a Hunter Valley Semillon style. So anyway, we can talk about that, but I think that's always a great choice. And I know that T. Edward has that in stock. It's a really good summer wine. Like me working at restaurants, like someone would ask me like, I'll have your Pinot Grigio. And if we didn't have a Pinot Grigio, I would just bring them whatever I thought was like closest to that. And like, no one ever was like, this isn't a Pinot Grigio. They're like, oh, this is cool. You know? And I'm like, cool. That's a Gruner. Like, congratulations. You tried a new wine. And so I think Semillon is a great option for people that are like, oh, I want a Sauvignon Blanc or something like that. And you bring them that. I don't think that they would cry about it. I think they'd be pretty stoked. So, and it's a wine that, because it's been bottle aged for 6+ years before we even release it, it only gets better as more oxygen is being introduced. So it's a great wine to have open, you know, a BTG option, because it's only getting better over like the course of 5 days rather than going on a decline after you first open it. So that's fun too. but we can chat more about that.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Danielle. Thanks a lot. It's great to talk, great to see you. And hopefully I'll see you this summer when you're back here in Portland.
I will be. I'm planning on spending the whole month of June in my homeland. I'm very excited, and it was so great to see all of you. Thank you for hanging out and listening to me ramble on about grape drink.
Great. All right. Bye. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Bye.